Hello and welcome to part 2 of our exploration of Shakespeare's Othello, and we're now on Act 1, Scene 2, so hopefully you've listened to the first one, but welcome anyway. We will continue. So if you remember last time we had Iago say he was going to go off and see Othello after he and Rodrigo had been stirring up Brabantio about Othello marrying Brabantio's daughter Desdemona. And again, we talked about medias res, and we had middle of the conversation. So we've got that here as well for scene 2. So Iago here, again, we talked about public and private face, and Iago presenting a public face of being an honest and loyal friend and soldier, actually, to Othello, serving under him. So in the conversation here, though in the trade of war I have slain men, yet do I hold it very stuff of the conscience to do no contrived murder. I lack iniquity sometimes to do me service. 9 or 10 times I would have thought to have yerked him here under the ribs. He's making out that he's honest, and also he's saying as well how, well, Shakespeare's having Iago say this about how he's been irritated by Brabantio himself in the past, and it's obviously all made up because he's just been there stirring up the hostility towards Othello. So it's a good one for that straight away. And Iago, neighbourly prated and spoke such scurvy and provoking terms against your honour that with little godliness I have did full hard forbear him. So he's making out that he's really been supporting Othello against the tirade of Brabantio. And notice Shakespeare has these respectful terms here. Remember the language that Rodrigo and Iago were using to describe Othello in scene 1 with racial epithets. Yet here we've got this public face of Iago where he's using, well, it's an honorific, it was a respectful honorific addressing him, or vocative, you might also know it as well. They're not exactly the same things. You can use honorifics as vocatives. I'll spell those. So they're not exactly the same thing. They should have just magically appeared in the corner. They're not exactly the same things. You can use honorifics. Honorifics are titles. But this is a respectful vocative. And it's reflecting Othello's rank and status. Oh, sorry, moving the thing around. Wrong button. And then be assured of this, that the Magnifico is much beloved and hath in his effect a voice potential as double as the Duke's. So he's warning Othello that Brabantio's voice in the Senate is very, because he said he was a senator, his voice is a very respected one. So this represents danger for Othello here. Be wary. So again, the public face of Iago is as being like a wise, friendly advisor, actually. He will divorce you or put upon you what restraint or grievance the law with all his might to enforce it on will give him cable. So he's just really emphasising the risk to Othello here. Because actually also I forgot to say that as well, are you fast married? So that means if you just married, you're only just now. Othello, I think Shakespeare presents Othello as a very dignified and commanding presence. He's a calm and wise leader. This is why he's in the position that he's in. He is actually being summoned to the Duke's court because they need him for military purposes, but we'll get on to that soon. Let him do his spite. My service which I have done the Signory shall out-tongue his complaints. So Shakespeare uses a metaphor here. Othello says, well, anything he says against me, the things I've done in service of the state will outweigh it. He's confident. He's not arrogant. He's confident. He knows his abilities and he knows his skills. 'Tis yet to know which, when I know that boasting is an honour, I shall promulgate. I fetch my life in being from men of royal siege, and my demerits may speak unbonneted to as proud a fortune as this that I have reached. So remember, I also said Shakespeare tends to reiterate what he says before. So the metaphor there is there explained. Also, Shakespeare establishes that Othello's love for Desdemona, I think this is what I think Shakespeare does. This establishes it's a very genuine love for Desdemona, and that is obviously really important to him. But look what lights come yond, more stage directions from Shakespeare there as well. Then those are the raised father and his friends, you were best go in. So that's Iago saying, well, they're the people they're all looking for. It's Brabantio and his party. And there's dramatic irony. There's a lot of dramatic irony in this play, particularly with Iago, isn't there? Because he is pretending to be supportive and helpful to Othello, but the dramatic irony is the audience know that he is the one who's been the architect of creating this problem that he is pretending to help Othello with. I am not what I am. Remember that with Iago from scene 1. Not I must be found. So Iago says, hurry up and get in. Othello says, no, I'm going to take him on. My parts, my title, my perfect soul shall manifest me rightly. So because Othello knows I've done nothing wrong, and I'm gonna deal with this. Again, it's that confidence. So Shakespeare establishes him as a noble, commanding, wise, virtuous, loving man, and military man as well, general. Significantly, by Janus, I think no, or Janus, it's where January comes from, isn't it? It's the two-faced Roman god. Ironic choice from Shakespeare there for Iago as a character. The servants of the Duke and my lieutenant, the goodness of the night upon you, friends, what is the news? So it's actually not, is it they, by Janus, I think, no, or Janus, I think no. It's actually Cassio, who is the one who Othello had promoted instead of Iago. So it's, again, there's a bit of dramatic tension. You think it's going to be a big conflict with Brabantio and that party, but it's not. It turns out to be Cassio with the officers. So, the goodness of the night upon you, friends. What is the news? The Duke does greet you generally, requires your haste post haste, that means really, really quickly, appearance even on the instant, as really, 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 really quickly. So, the Duke wants to see Othello straight away, very, very urgently. So it's a military emergency of some kind, and the galleys, they are ships. There's been messengers coming in, and the consuls. So all the diplomats and the senators are all going to be meeting. You've been hotly called for. Then the Senate hath sent about 3 several quests to search you out. So they've been looking for Othello. It is well I am found by you. I will but spend a word here in the house and go with you. So Othello's got some business to attend to. Ancient, what makes he here? So Cassio is a higher ranking officer, so that's why he addresses Iago as ancient, because that's Iago's rank. Faith he tonight hath boarded a land carrack. If it prove lawful prize, he's made forever. This is a nautical metaphor Shakespeare's using here. It's a type of ship, like a cargo ship. If it prove lawful prize, he's made forever. So that's a metaphor about Othello marrying Desdemona. And this is a Shakespearean pun. He's married to who? Married to... And in Shakespeare's time, it also meant marry, also meant, like, indeed, effectively. So Shakespeare, that's a Shakespearean pun there. We don't use it in that sense anymore, in modern English. Come, Captain, will you go? Yeah, if Othello comes back, have with you. Here comes another troop to seek for you. But this time it's not. This is actually Brabantio not seeking for the Duke. This is Brabantio seeking out of rage. It is Brabantio, General, be advised, he comes to bad intent. And that's ironic because obviously appearance versus reality. Iago is doing that himself really, but appearing to be a loyal friend. Signor, it is the Moor. So Rodrigo again using a racial form of address for Rodrigo. Sorry, not for Rodrigo, for Othello. Down with him, thief. So notice how Shakespeare has Brabantio, I haven't highlighted that, but Brabantio actually adopts the language that's been programmed into him by Iago and Rodrigo. Well, Iago has effectively been programming Rodrigo, and now Brabantio's been programmed by Iago. Obviously, that's not what Shakespeare would use, program. That's my own metaphor. But you see, it's brainwashing effectively, isn't it? You can see the influence. If you're writing it in if you're putting it in a piece of formal writing, you talk about how Shakespeare demonstrates Iago's influence on Brabantio by Brabantio adopting the language that they were using when they were rousing him and emotionally charging him effectively. So they draw the swords. Obviously Shakespeare didn't write that. You, Rodrigo, come, sir, I am for you. But Othello diffuses the situation again. So look at his wisdom and his authority here. Keep up your bright swords, for the dew will rust them. Good signor, you shall more command with years than with your weapons. So the nobility and honour here of this. So there's a nice metaphor here, the idea of don't fight now. You know, it's early in the morning. It's night time. We're not going to fight. You shall command more with years and with your weapons. So there's another metaphor there, like Brabantio's age. He's not going to beat Othello in a fight, you know, in a sword fight. There's no point in doing this. So Shakespeare is presenting Othello as diffusing the situation. Brabantio accuses, again, look at that. Actually, he's using the thief there as well. Where hast thou stowed my daughter? Damned as thou art, thou hast enchanted her. For I refer to me all things of sense, if she in chains of magic were not bound. So Brabantio's own prejudices are coming through here as well. And because to the Elizabethan / Jacobean mindset, they didn't know much about Africa, and it's very much a continent of mystery and magic as well. So because Othello, his origin is from that continent, there's instant prejudice and assumption that he's got some kind of connection to witchcraft. And then there's also the racist angle as well of, because he's got dark skin, therefore he's a being of darkness automatically. So there's a sense of that prejudice coming through there as well. Obviously you can see there's other characters don't share the prejudice, like, you know, Cassio. There isn't anything there, at least at the moment anyway. So you have, whether a maid so tender, fair and happy opposite to marriage that she shunned the wealthy curled darlings of our nation. So Brabantio can't understand why his daughter wouldn't have married, he means here, the wealthy curled darlings of our nation. This, through implication, he means white Venetian men, because obviously it's set in Venice. Well, not all of it's set in Venice, but this early part of the play is set in Venice. So antithesis there as well, because of the fairness and lightness. You've got run from her guardage to the sooty bosom. So there's deliberate compared to darkness, and so the sooty bosom. There is also, again, this is something I'm not 100% sure about, but I'm sure I've heard something about. In the past, there was, again, another part of the established racism of the era. Sooty is interesting because there was an idea from white people of that era that the darkness could kind of rub off as soot. It was actually could flake off or something. I'm sure I've heard of that. I might be wrong. I might have to go away and double check that before the next video. I'll see if I can find out. But whatever way you look at it, it works from the angle of prejudice anyway, and the deliberate contrast between Othello's fairness, as they mean that to mean lightness and also equals goodness. And so Brabantio is using it in that sense negatively. Thou hast practised on her with foul charms, abused her of delicate youth with drugs or minerals that weakens motion. So I said about magic, you know, there's an accusation here if she couldn't have fallen in love with him. How could she fall in love with him? This is Brabantio's view. How could she fall in love with him? He must have used magic. That's the only reason I can think of. And of course, in that era, witchcraft is enough to get you killed, isn't it? You know. I'll have it disputed on. 'Tis problem palpable to thinking, I therefore apprehend and do attach thee for an abuser of the world, a practicer of arts inhibited and out of warrant. So effectively practicing dark magic. Lay hold of him, if you do resist, subdue him at his peril. But Othello, again, the commanding, authoritative presence. Hold your hands, both of you, of my inclining and the rest. So he means everybody, stop. Don't fight. The people who support me and those who don't support me, everybody. So he's the appeal to calm down. This is interesting. Were it my cue to fight, I should have known it without a prompter. This is ironic considering this is lexis from words from the world of theatre. And Shakespeare, obviously being ahead of his time in many ways, he, what we call in the modern terms, they didn't have a term for this in Shakespeare's time, but breaking the fourth wall. It's actually a kind of self-referential, ironic acknowledgement of the play's own artificiality. This is also something that there is a modern term to describe this. They call this like lampshade hanging in modern script writing terms, where you draw attention to either maybe a flaw or a structural feature or a cliche, and you draw attention to it that in a way that allows you to diffuse it. And it is actually a real term, lampshade hanging. I find that a very odd one, but it's because it was invented in the 21st century as a term. Whither would you that I go, to answer this your charge? To prison, till it fit time of law and course of direct session call thee to answer. What if I do obey? How may the Duke be therewith satisfied, whose messengers are here about my side? So we say, well, if I go off with you to prison, the Duke summoned me. That's not going to look very good, is it? I've been summoned here on business of state. So apparently it would have been pronounced busyness of state. I'd found out. 'Tis most true, most worthy Signor, the Duke's in council, and your noble self, I am sure, is sent for. So Brabantio is also summoned as well because he's a senator. How? The Duke in council in this time of the night? Bring him away. Mine's not an idle cause. The Duke himself or any of the brothers of the state cannot feel this wrong as 'twere their own. For if such actions may have passage free, bond slaves and pagans shall our statesmen be. So this establishes a kind of white paranoia, a white paranoid racism of the establishment. This old man, Brabantio, he's a wealthy white senator, and he's effectively saying they're going to agree with me, the Duke and the other senators, because if this is allowed, then we're going to end up having slaves and pagans, as in non-Christians. They're going to be the future statesmen. So this is a fear of what's known as like miscegenation, which is essentially mixed race marriages between whites and other races. So he's anti that. So Brabantio's racism there, Shakespeare finishes on a rhyming couplet. And look at that scene and think about how Shakespeare's structured and presented those characters, the language that they've used. Who do you think we're meant to be siding with? Are we meant to be siding with Brabantio or Othello? Who looks better here? We've got Iago, we know he's been lying. Othello has diffused the fight. He's acted with noble dignity. Brabantio is coming in with baseless accusations of using magic to seduce his daughter. So Shakespeare deliberately ends the scene with two strands of tension. One element of tension, the military angle. There's something big happening. There's some terrible military crisis. And with the other one is this more personal level. And that's really what the play is. It appears to be a military kind of play, but actually it's much more domestic level. It's a domestic play, really. But anyway, more of that in the future. Thank you for listening and watching as well. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and notification bell, all those things. I've got my other videos if you're interested in those. And all that remains to be said, again, thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good day or night, whatever you're doing. Farewell.